Miss Alex Fuentes to the stand. Good afternoon. Could you please state your full name and spell your last name for the jury?
Hi, my name is Alex Fuentes, Sifuentes.
And where do you currently go to school?
Currently, I'm a senior at Colorado High School, but everyone just calls it CHS.
Do you know the victim in this case?
Yes, I was a member of the CHS mock trial team with Mr. Brackman as my coach. I was a junior at the time of Mr. Brackman's death.
And what did you think about Mr. Brackman?
Honestly, I felt like he was an amazing coach and a talented litigator. He was always finding ways to improve our team and our team's performance.
Do you know the defendant in this case, Avery Becker?
Yes, Avery and I went to the same school and we were on the same mock trial team.
And how would you describe your relationship with Avery Becker?
Avery and I have always been very close. She was actually the one who convinced me to try out for mock trial in the first place. I really liked her and we were practically best friends when we were on the team together.
How many years were you on the mock trial team with Avery?
I would say we were on the team together for about 3 years.
And what qualities or attributes did Avery bring to the mock trial team?
Avery played several witness roles over the years. She was really good at making things up on the fly. Avery had this amazing ability to make things up while on the witness stand and make you believe that it was completely true.
Based on what you personally observed, how did Avery conduct herself on the mock trial team?
Based on what I saw, Avery was always late to practice and was never prepared. But like I said, she was good at making things up on the fly.
And again, based on what you personally observed, how did the other members of the mock trial team feel about Avery?
It looked to me like most of the people on our team could not stand Avery because she was always late and was never prepared for practice. The team was always anxious about Avery's behavior.
How did you personally feel about Avery Becker's conduct in mock trial?
I did not like the way that she talked to our mock trial teammates or to Mr. Brackman.
So, what did you observe about Avery and Mr. Brackman's relationship in mock trial?
Their relationship was always back and forth. It seemed like Mr. Brackman was frustrated with Avery, and Avery was always frustrated with Mr. Brackman. He's always telling Avery to do a better job, but Avery always simply refused.
How did Avery react to Mr. Brackman telling her to do a better job?
It seemed like Avery hated Mr. Brackman for this, and Avery always played the victim and refused to work hard.
So, I'd like to discuss the regional mock trial tournament. Did something significant happen to the team before the tournament?
Yes, actually, before the tournament, Coach Brackman demoted Avery to the B team.
And how did Avery deal with being demoted to B team?
Right after being demoted, Avery talked to Taylor Perkins, Avery's second best friend, and somehow convinced Taylor to quit the A team for her.
What happened after Taylor quit the A team after Avery got demoted?
Mr. Brackman was forced to bring Avery back up to the A team.
So, how did the whole team react to this?
I mean, the whole team was pretty upset.
And after all the drama, what happened with Avery at the regional tournament?
Well, then Avery won Best Attorney Award and Best Closing Argument Award.
And what happened at the next mock trial practice after the regional tournament?
At the next practice, Mr. Brackman officially kicked her off the team.
So, were you aware of any reason that Mr. Brackman gave for kicking Avery off the team?
From what I remember, Mr. Brackman tried to explain to Avery that she should not confuse good showmanship with good lawyering. He told her that what Avery did would be considered malpractice in the real world.
And did you observe Avery respond to this?
Yes, from what I saw, Avery was absolutely infuriated by Mr. Brackman's comments and she stormed out of practice.
After Avery stormed out of practice, did you observe Avery do anything else?
Yeah, as Avery was leaving the practice, I saw Avery grab a Sharpie pen on the way out of the room. Then Avery vandalized Mr. Brackman's Porsche by writing Worst Attorney Award across the hood.
After Avery vandalized Mr. Brackman's Porsche, what happened to her in terms of her connection to the mock trial team?
After that, Avery was kicked off the team for good.
And how did Avery react to this?
Avery then texted me and asked me to convince Coach Brackman to let her back on the team.
I would ask Ms. Fuentes to look at the exhibit book and look at Exhibit 14. Do you recognize Exhibit 14?
Yes, this is a screenshot of the cell phone conversation between me and Avery.
And is this an accurate depiction of the screenshot that you took at the time?
Yes, it is.
Do you know who took the screenshot of the text conversation between you and Avery?
I took this screenshot.
And when did you take this screenshot?
I took it right after I met with Detective Markowitz.
Your Honor, at this time, I ask the court to admit Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objection?
I'd like permission to voir dire, Your Honor.
You may.
I just have a few questions for you, Ms. Cifuentes. So this is a screenshot of the text message, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So this is not an original copy.
No, it is not.
No further questions, Your Honor. We do not object to the admittance of this exhibit.
And Exhibit 4 is admitted. 14, rather, is admitted.
Can you please explain to the jury what you and Avery are discussing in these texts?
Avery is asking me to talk to Coach Brackman about having Avery back on the team.
Was there anything during these text conversations that made you concerned?
Yes, actually, after I told Avery that I doubted anyone could change Coach Brackman's mind about having her back on the team, Avery became enraged. Avery texted Coach and said that he was really going to be upset when he saw what she was going to do to his house.
Did Avery explain what she meant by that?
Yeah, Avery said that she was going to wait until Coach Brackman was at work and then she was going to break in and trash the place.
You testified earlier that you took the screenshot of the text message. Why did you do that?
Well, after Coach's death, I had to go down and talk to a police detective, and I told the detective about these text messages from Avery, but I'd forgotten my phone at home, so the detective just asked me to send him a screenshot.
And how did these text messages show that they are from Avery?
At the top of the screenshot, it says Avery Becker as the contact.
I'd like to address one more topic at this point, Ms. Cifuentes. Do you know a person by the name of Blair Rollins?
Yes, he's another student at CHS, but I didn't know him very well. I'm not sure if I ever even had a class with Rollins.
And did you ever steal Avery's phone and give it to Blair?
Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. I hardly knew Blair and certainly would not have stolen Avery's phone to give it to Blair.
Ms. Cifuentes, would you consider Avery Becker a rival of yours?
Certainly not. Before all of this happened, Avery and I were friends and teammates. We pushed each other to be better. Avery and I liked each other very much, which is why she actually texted me to help her get back on the team.
Finally, Ms. Cifuentes, do you have another conversation with Avery after they had been kicked off the mock trial team besides the text message exchange that you just testified about?
Yes, I saw Avery at the Fry Shack after Avery got kicked off the team. We had a great talk about how Avery should move forward and forget about the trial team. I specifically remember Avery thanking me for asking Mr. Brackman to let her back on the team.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass this witness for cross-examination.
Okay. Ms. May, you may cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Cifuentes, I just have a few questions if you're okay with that.
Okay.
To start off, would you say that you and Avery Becker are close friends?
Yes, I would.
And is it also true that you only really ever spent time together at mock trial practice or related events?
Yes.
And is it true that you found Avery's lack of effort frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I felt that I put a lot of effort into the team, so it was kind of frustrating.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
And is it also true that Avery won the Best Attorney Award at the regional tournament?
Yes, she did.
And did she also win the Best Closing Argument Award?
Yes.
And Mr. Brackman said that she didn't deserve these awards.
Yes, he did.
And while she was extremely upset, Avery wrote on Mr. Brackman's car, correct?
Yes.
And you think that Mr. Brackman should have pressed charges, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Isn't it? And is it true that Mr. Brackman kicked Avery off the team?
Yes, he did.
And you thought that the team would be better off without Avery, correct?
That's correct.
And you were excited for the larger role that you would play with Avery off the team?
I mean, who wouldn't?
So that's a yes?
Well, I don't think it really, yes.
And is it true that Avery tried to get back on the team?
Yes, she asked me to talk to Mr. Brackman.
Mhm. And you saw Avery Becker at the Fry Shack, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
The night before the murder of Mr. Brackman?
Yes.
And is it true that Avery gave you his phone?
Yeah, just for a brief moment so I could play a game.
Right, allowed you to play a game on it. So you had complete access to his unlocked phone, correct?
Yes, I did.
I'd now like to move on to the text messages that you provided to Detective Markowitz. Is it true that you forgot to bring your phone to the interview?
Yeah, my battery was kind of messed up with my phone and it needed a charge, and then I left it at home. I left my phone at home charging.
Yes, you did forget it. And is it true that you no longer have that phone?
Yeah, like I said, my battery was messed up, so I got rid of the phone.
So you no longer have it, correct?
That is correct.
And do you know Blair Rollins?
Barely.
Were you in the same grade as him?
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Witness Cifuentes, can you remind us of your real name?
Sawyer Beardsley.
Thank you, Ms. Beardsley. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cifuentes, were you ever jealous of Avery?
No, I was never jealous of Avery.
And just to reiterate, why couldn't you bring in your actual phone to show the text between you and Avery?
Like I said earlier, my battery was kind of messed up with my phone and I needed it to hold a charge, and then it was difficult bringing it in and I forgot it. So that's just how I ended up sending a screenshot.
And finally, were you close with Blair Rollins?
No, I was not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Cifuentes, you may step down, figuratively speaking. And the prosecution may call its next witness. Don't forget to unmute. Okay.
Can you hear me, Your Honor?
Yeah, I'm listening carefully.
Okay, I'll try to speak up.
Can the witness hear him?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, good. Then Mr. Walker, proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Can you please state your name and occupation for the record?
My name is Jordan Markowitz. I'm a homicide detective for the Denver Police Department.
And how long have you been working for the Denver Police Department?
I've been working there for the past 13 years, working as a detective for the past 7.
And what have been your primary practices over those 13 years?
Over the past 13 years, I've primarily worked as a homicide detective, overseeing countless cases. I specialize in cell phone data, however, and have downloaded the contents and worked with literally hundreds of cell phones.
And have you had any education outside of the Denver Police Department in those areas of expertise?
Yes, I have a cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement. I completed a 3-day training course and passed a certification test. And throughout this course, I learned how to acquire and interpret cell tower data.
And how frequently do you use that training on an annual basis?
Oh, I use this training constantly as a detective. It's invaluable to most of the cases I work on. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of cell phones.
And finally, have you had any prior experience as an expert witness in other cases?
As a detective with extensive knowledge of cell phone technology, I've obtained and interpreted cell tower data in over 50 cases.
Your Honor, the people would respectfully request that the court qualify this witness as an expert in the field of cellular device analysis as well as homicide investigation.
And who is doing the cross-examination of this witness?
That would be me.
Okay, would you put your video on, please? And yeah, oh, there you are. Okay. Any objection?
One moment. Detective Markowitz, the certification you mentioned in the cell phone technology and forensic data recovery is just a certification, correct?
Yeah, I completed a 3-day training course and passed the certification test.
So there was no degree necessary to receive this certification?
I mean, no, but there's more than a degree. I have extensive years of police training and have used this constantly throughout my training.
Okay. After your many years of experience with the Denver Police Department, you do not have any reviews in your testimony of your performance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Your Honor, I object to Detective Jordan Markowitz being confirmed as an expert witness in the fields of homicide, cell phone technology, and the forensic data recovery on the grounds of lack of experience.
Response, Mr. Walker?
Your Honor, my witness has had countless years of experience as well as a very standardized qualification to be certified in this realm.
Well, under 702, in order to be qualified as an expert witness, the witness must have knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education that supports their opinions as an expert. And I find that in this case, the witness has established sufficient basis for that finding. so I will qualify him as an expert in those areas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Markowitz, who was the victim in this case that we're discussing?
We found an ID and were able to confirm it was Mackenzie Brackman.
Had you ever seen or met Brackman prior to the crime?
Yeah, I've even worked with him before. He's a defense attorney.
Will that have any impact on your ability to analyze the evidence?
Not at all. My job hinges on being objective.
So let's delve into your understanding of the evidence. At what point were you assigned to investigate this case?
Well, on Friday, March 6, 2020, a passing motorist reported someone who had appeared to be passed out on the porch of 444 South Flower Street. This was confirmed to be the deceased Brackman, and a team of officers responded, and I responded at approximately 2:20 p.m. that same day.
Can you tell us a little bit about the first things that really stuck out to you when you arrived at the scene?
Oh, well, it was not a pretty sight, I can tell you that. The front door was wide open, and the victim was lying face down in a pool of blood with a large stab wound in his back. They were also wearing a t-shirt that read, "Keep calm and mock on," so I guess they ran a mock trial program on the side.
Okay. Let's get into the digital portion of the evidence. Can you begin to explain how you use cell phone data to narrow the possible perpetrators?
Yeah, well, I immediately reached out to the school to obtain the contact information for the students on the mock trial team. The first student I talked to actually clued me into some conflict within the team, and this turned out to be the biggest break in the case thus far.
And who was that student?
A student by the name of Alex Cifuentes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Alex Cifuentes helped your analysis?
Well, I contacted Alex pretty soon after the event. They told me that a teammate had texted them something about a plan to vandalize Mackenzie Brackman's house.
I'd like to direct your attention to what has previously been admitted as Exhibit 14. Detective Markowitz, are these the texts which Alex Cifuentes brought to your attention?
Yes, these are the screenshots I received from after I questioned Alex. According to the messages, the defendant asked Alex to help get them back on the team after they'd been given the boot for vandalizing Mackenzie Brackman's car. The defendant then proceeds to threaten to break into the victim's house while they're at work and vandalize it.
And why were those text messages significant in regards to the case?
Well, I received the screenshots after I'd asked Alex and Alex's parents to come down to complete an interview. The information pointed me to Avery as a possible suspect, and that's where I began to investigate the defendant's cell phone records.
And what impact did that have on you?
In my expert opinion, the texts show a clear motive, as the attack happened during the middle of a workday. It's probable that Avery broke in to the house with the goal to vandalize it, but was interrupted by Mackenzie Brackman.
Okay. Can we get into what you found on Avery's telephone?
Unfortunately, we don't actually have Avery's phone, as they claim they lost it, but we do have her call detail records, or CDRs, and these can tell us some very interesting things.
What did they tell you?
Well, they tell us that Avery received several phone calls and texts from a Taylor Perkins throughout the day of the murder, and I was able to use this information to place her location at the scene of the crime around the time of death.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that timing?
Yeah, so the first thing we know is that Becker was at home somewhere between 12:45 and 12:50 p.m. Later, Avery can be placed driving along Rock Creek Parkway at 12:55 p.m. The records indicate that she was at Brackman's house from 1:05 to 1:17 p.m. This can all be seen in Exhibits 15 and 16, which show the cell towers Avery's phone connected with and the probable route they drove on the day of the murder.
Your Honor, may I have permission for my co-counsel to share Exhibits 15 and 16 with the opposing counsel, Detective Markowitz, as well as the jury?
You may.
Okay. Detective Markowitz, do you recognize Exhibits 15 and 16?
Yes, these are the diagrams I put together that demonstrate the position of the the location of the cell towers and the positions of their antennas that Avery's phone connected with on the day of March 6th. Exhibit 16 also shows the probable route they drove that day.
Do these diagrams accurately depict the cellular telephone data you gathered?
Yes.
And did you create these exhibits?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I have permission to admit what have been marked as Exhibits 15 and 16 into evidence?
Any objection? Ms. D'Antoni, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. No objections.
Okay, then exhibits 15 and 16 are admitted.
And additionally, Your Honor, may I have permission to publish exhibits 15 and 16 to the jury?
You may.
Thank you. Detective Markowitz, can you elaborate on cell tower connections?
Yeah, so cell phones are constantly reaching out to find cell towers, even when the phone is not in use. Typically, a phone will pair with the cell tower closest to it. However, this is not always the case. For example, if the closest tower is particularly busy, a cell phone might reach out to one farther away, but less busy.
Does that happen very frequently?
Oh, no, not at all. That's pretty rare.
And how are the antennas used to further narrow the possible locations?
Yeah, so in order to connect with cell phones, the towers use 3-directional 120-degree antennas. Using the information about which antenna a cell phone connects to, we can precisely determine the location of a cell phone at any time. Unfortunately, the service providers don't keep this information. Instead, they only record it when a call is placed or received. But as stated before, luckily the defendant received several calls and texts throughout the day from Taylor Perkins, and I was able to use this to place Avery and her cell phone at the scene of the murder at the time of death.
And how did those cell tower records kind of aid your case against Miss Becker?
They show us that Becker was at Mackenzie Brackman's house around the time of death. Before the murder, the records also show that Avery was driving on the road, which would be the most probable route from her house to the victims.
Detective Markowitz, I have one final summarizing question to ask you. Can you tell us a little bit about what your primary takeaways from analyzing this case have been?
Well, the clear and obvious takeaway is that the objective data gathered by the CDRs gives the straightforward story that Avery's Becker phone traveled from Avery's house to Mackenzie Brackman's house on the day of the murder. She spent a significant amount of time on the property around the time of death. And based on all this evidence, it is highly likely that she was in possession of her phone on the day of the murder. All this evidence points to her guilt.
Thank you for your attention today, Detective. I have no further questions, Your Honor, and I pass this witness for cross-examination.
Cross?
Alrighty then. Okay. Let's begin with your observations on 444 South Flower Street. Detective Markowitz, you mentioned a blood spatter in the house, correct?
That's correct.
And you said the blood splatter was found on the floor and the ceiling.
That's correct.
You also stated that you did not proceed to the location of the knife, correct?
Yeah.
The forensic team was then responsible to process the scene as you had earlier mentioned.
Yeah, that's not kind of my area of expertise. I left that to the forensic team.
Okay. You saw the blood spatters on the wall and the ceiling as well. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. However, you did not actually proceed to the location of the knife?
I saw it when I first walked upon the property, but I didn't go over and pick up the knife.
Your Honor, asked and answered.
Response?
Pardon my audio.
The objection was asked and answered.
Oh, okay.
So move on.
Okie dokie. Let me So
I'm really sorry, participants. I'm going to let my dog out. But I'm bringing you with me. Go.
Okay.
Proceed.
You categorize the marks on the ceiling as you categorize the marks on the ceiling and wall as Coxoff marks, correct?
Yeah, that's what I believe them to be.
Despite being in the preceded location that was photographed.
Wait, sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Despite being in the preceded location that was photographed.
Yeah, I believe them to be cast marks.
Okay. And the forensic team also took a photograph of the scene, correct?
I believe so.
Were the images corrupted?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have the images. They were unfortunately corrupted, and we don't have access to them.
Okay. Now I would like to discuss the positioning of the victim's body. You earlier stated that the knife was found near the body, correct?
Yeah.
Your testimony also stated that based on your research, if Mr. Brackman seemed to be running away after being stabbed, logically the knife would be found further away from the body. Is that correct?
This is correct.
Okay. So let's move on to your history with Mackenzie Brackman. Detective Markowitz, in your testimony, you stated that you had met Mr. Brackman before, correct?
Yeah. He's a defense attorney. I come in contact with them all the time as a police detective.
Mm-hmm. You also stated that in his cases, which you had the displeasure of being cross-examined by, he took cheap shots and attacked the work of the police, correct?
Oh, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Now let's discuss Miss Becker's cell phone. Avery Becker claimed to have lost her cell phone the day before the murder, correct?
That's what I heard from her attorney.
Alrighty. And you claim that Becker was not telling the truth about losing her cell phone the day before the crime, correct?
Based on all of the objective evidence that we have, she was in possession of her cell phone.
Okay. If that is the case, it would be very strange that Miss Becker would not answer Miss Perkins' texts or calls at the time due to their close friendship.
I mean, I don't think so. I feel like if she was in the process of going to vandalize Mackenzie Brackman's house, she wouldn't answer.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Please, Your Honor, just briefly. Detective Markowitz, is it probable that Avery Becker's telephone connected to a cell tower that wasn't the closest one in proximity to her on March 6th?
Not at all. That's very unlikely. Her phone connected with the 3 towers along the route. That would have been very unlikely for her phone to just randomly connect with those unless she was in the location.
And finally, do you have any reason to believe that Alex Cifuentes fabricated those messages with Avery Becker?
Not at all. His story, all of the other evidence we have corroborates his story, and there's no reason in my opinion that he may have falsified the messages.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, so Mr. Detective Markowitz, you may step down. All right, and the prosecution may call its last witness.
The prosecution calls Kyle Cusack to the stand.
Okay, and Kyle, will you remind us of your real name?
Yes, it's Sutton Damiano.
Okay. Thank you. You may proceed.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Kyle Cusack.
And what do you do for a living, Miss Cusack?
I am a Colorado Bureau of Investigation certified crime scene reconstruction investigator, also known as a CSR, not to be confused with a police officer. I am in no way a police officer.
Where are you employed?
I am a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
And what does your job entail?
It includes investigating complex crime scenes, which include, but are not limited to, home invasions, property crimes, and homicides. My job is to look at the facts and evidence and reconstruct a complete, unbiased picture of what happened.
What are your qualifications to be a crime scene reconstruction investigator?
I have 19 years of experience, and I spent the last 3 years of my tenure with the city of Denver, along with my CSR certification.
Your Honor, I move to enter Ms. Cusack as an expert witness in crime scene reconstruction and investigation.
Mr. Long?
Yes, a few questions for the witness.
You may.
Cusack, do you have any certification for your position at the Denver Police Department?
Yes, I have a certification of crime scene reconstruction investigation.
And are you an employee of the Denver Police Department or a volunteer at the Denver Police Department?
I am a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
So then are you certified as a crime scene reconstructor?
Yes, I am a certified crime scene reconstruction investigator.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objections.
Okay, then this witness is qualified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction and investigation. You may proceed.
Thank you. Can you tell me about why you are here?
Yes, so I'm here to give an expert opinion on the event that occurred on March 6, 2020.
What is this event that occurred?
It was an attempted burglary that resulted in the murder of Mr. Mackenzie Brackman.
What did you do to formulate your expert opinion about this event?
So I visited the scene of the homicide and reviewed all of the police reports, photographs, and security videos. I formulated my expert opinion based off a strict process and 5 key steps.
What is your process?
I always assume that all the cases presented to me will be going to trial, so I can undoubtedly conduct a thorough and comprehensive investigation.
And what about the 5 steps?
So they are recognition and documentation, collection of evidence, evaluation of evidence, hypothesis and testing, and reconstruction, which also includes peer review.
How did all of these steps help you?
They help me refine, organize, and understand the evidence, leading me to a conclusion about what happened on March 6th.
If you could please take a look at your notebook of exhibits. We will start with Exhibit 17. Did you construct Exhibit 17?
Yes.
Did you use this exhibit during your investigation?
Yes.
What is this exhibit?
It is something that I created during my investigation. I used the notes I took to compile the spreadsheets and a timeline of events in this exhibit.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 17 into evidence.
Mr. Long, any objection?
No objections at this time.
Exhibit
Permission. Apologies.
17 is admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor.
You may.
My co-counsel will now share what has been marked as Exhibit 17. Can you tell us about Exhibit 17?
Yes, so the first page is for witnesses and the evidence that pertains to them, how I got this information, and a summary of their stance on the case. The second page is specifically for evidence, which shows how the evidence was handled, and the third page is a possible timeline of events.
Can you please explain the flowchart on page 3?
Yes, so this flowchart is a visual representation of the events that occurred in order that the evidence demonstrates. The boxes at the top of each list are the main events, with sub-events in chronological order beneath. In columns 2 and 3, you may notice that there are two events that could be synonymous with one another. This event could have occurred at either time, and the same outcome would have been achieved.
How did these notes help you with the case?
They help keep me organized and ensure that I looked at every piece of evidence to construct the most probable chain of events that occurred.
Moving forward, we are going to talk about the evidence found at a crime scene. Let's start with Exhibits 9 and 18. Can you take a look at these exhibits, please? Have you seen these pictures before?
Yes.
Do these pictures accurately represent what you saw at the scene of the crime?
Yes.
Did you use these pictures in your investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibits 9 and 18 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections.
Exhibits 9 and 18 are admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor?
You may.
My co-counsel will now share what has been marked as Exhibits 9 and 18. Can you tell me about what you see?
So Exhibit 9 shows a broken plate on the floor of the kitchen, and Exhibit 18 shows scuff marks near the back door.
Why are these images important to the case?
They were vital for determining the chain of events that happened. These pieces of evidence are what I used to determine that there was a struggle. The broken plate illustrates that during the fight between Mr. Brackman and the intruder, they hit the kitchen table and knocked the plate to the ground. The scuff marks found also indicated that there was a struggle.
If we could
Objection,
turn on.
speculation.
Sorry, Mr. Long,
Objection, speculation.
response?
Your Honor, my witness has been qualified in the field of crime scene reconstruction, which is looking at the evidence and reconstructing what happened, which is what she is doing right here.
Okay. I'm going to overrule the objection, but that is a good area for cross-examination.
If we could turn our attention to Exhibits 7 and 8, can you please take a look at these exhibits? Have you seen these images before?
Yes.
Are these pictures accurate representations of what you have seen previously?
Yes.
Did you use these pictures during your investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibits 7 and 8 into evidence.
Any objection? You're on
No
mute.
objection.
Okay. Exhibits 7 and 8 are admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor?
You may.
My co-counsel will now share what has been marked as Exhibits 7 and 8. Can you tell me about what you see in these exhibits?
Yes. So Exhibit 7 is a picture of the open knife drawer at the crime scene, and Exhibit 8 is a picture of the knife block on the counter with the largest knife missing.
How did these pieces of evidence help with your case?
This evidence is what showed me that Mr. Brackman had an awareness of his intruder. The open knife drawer shows that Mr. Brackman was aware of the intruder and the open knife drawer to look for a weapon. When he was not satisfied with the knives in the knife drawer, he reached for a larger knife in the knife block, as shown, there being a missing knife.
What did you determine happened after Mr. Brackman grabbed the knife?
Mr. Brackman confronted the intruder when he entered through the back door. The individual struggled over the knife, indicated by the scuff marks, which led to the kitchen, where they hit the table and the plate was knocked to the ground.
And what was the final step that happened in this chain of events?
The intruder disarmed Mr. Brackman and gained control of the knife. Mr. Brackman and the intruder were in close proximity with each other in a bear hug-like position. The intruder held the knife like this, with the blade facing towards them, and reached over, stabbing Mr. Brackman in the upper back and shoulder area.
So when the assailant raised the knife, what direction was the blade facing?
Downwards.
Finally, what is your expert opinion about what happened?
In the end, the evidence demonstrated that this was clearly a planned burglary, which resulted in the murder of Mr. Mackenzie Brackman by the intruder. Mr. Brackman was alerted to the intruder's presence at the back of the house before the intruder entered. Unfortunately, in the ensuing struggle, the intruder took and gained control of the knife and murdered Mr. Brackman in his own home.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness for cross-examination.
Okay. Mr. Long, you may cross-examine.
Good afternoon. Let's start with your qualifications. You work for the police department, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
As a civilian,
Yes, I am a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
and you reconstruct crime scenes, correct?
That is correct, yes.
You visited the scene of the murder of Mr. Brackman at 444 South Flower Street
Yes, I did visit the crime scene.
before or after the evidence was processed by other experts.
I visited the crime scene and reviewed the evidence.
And this murder occurred on March 6, 2020.
That is correct, yes.
And the video shows a masked person entering the residence.
That is correct.
Objection.
Basis of your objection.
The attorney is referring to a piece of evidence that has not yet been admitted into evidence.
Yeah, I believe she's correct, Mr. Long. Do you have any argument on that?
No argument.
Okay.
I'll move on. Was the face of the intruder ever seen?
No.
Objection.
And the basis for that objection?
Again, the attorney is asking my witness to refer to something in an exhibit that has not yet been admitted into evidence.
Well, I believe, Mr. Long, you want to respond to that?
It goes to the crime scene reconstruction.
Okay. I'm going to allow that more general question that didn't specifically refer to an exhibit. You may answer, Ms. Cusack.
In the ring videos that I reviewed with my 5 key steps, the face of the intruder was not able to be viewed. No.
And you also found that the knife was lodged in Mr. Brackman's back, correct?
His upper back and shoulder area.
And was the knife lodged in a way that it was hard to pull out?
As I am not a coroner, I do not have the information to answer that question.
Well, then how, if Brackman was in so much pain, could he have pulled the knife out?
As I am not the coroner, I do not have the answers for that information.
Okay, let's move on. You concluded that someone alike to Avery's body type killed Mr. Brackman, but is there any DNA or visual proof that this is the case?
I would always love to have a specific list of the exact person that committed the crimes that I review, but just as any other case, I was not able to have the DNA of the intruder at the crime scene. But if I did, it would make my job a lot easier, as that is what I'm supposed to be doing, is look for who committed the crime.
And the blood splatters from the scene was corrupted, correct?
Yes, but I was able to review the information, and I used my 5 key steps and peer review to determine my stance on what happened. And I was able to review it and have peer review.
But you couldn't piece together the whole story of the case.
I have 19 years of experience, and I believe that I pieced together the case perfectly.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Did the corrupted files matter to your investigation?
No, I was able to completely review the photographs before the corruption and have peer review with my 5 key steps, and they did not matter that they were corrupted to my stance on the case.
And why did they not matter?
I was able to review them thoroughly and with comprehensive thought and investigation and peer review.
Thank you.
Objection didn't answer the question.
Pardon, Mr. Long?
Didn't answer the question. Objection.
I can't have the court reporter read the question back, so I'm trying to remember that from my memory. Can you repeat it, Ms. Cuselli?
Yes, I said, why did these photographs not matter to your investigation?
And Ms. Cusack, what was your response?
I was able to review them before the corruption with my 5 key steps and peer review.
Okay, then overruled.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Then Ms. Cusack, you may step down. Any further witnesses for the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Right. Then let's move to the defense. We'll have the first witness for the defense.
The defense calls Avery Becker to the stand.
Okay. You may begin.
To start off, please state your full name and spell your last name for the jury.
My name is Avery Becker, Becker.
Thank you, Avery. Where do you live?
I live in the state of Colorado.
And where did you go to school last year?
Last year, I was a senior at Colorado High School.
And what clubs did you participate in at Colorado High School?
All 4 years of high school, I was a member of the mock trial team.
Were you good at mock trial?
I'd like to think so. I had won many awards over my time in the club.
And can you describe your relationship with your coach, Mr. Brackman?
Mr. Brackman and I had a rough relationship. We always seemed to be at odds. We disagreed greatly on the best way to go about specifically cross-examinations and closing statements in the court of mock trial.
And thank you, Avery. Can you now tell us about Taylor Perkins?
Taylor Perkins is my best friend. We did everything together. As freshmen, we even joined mock trial to be together.
And what was your role in mock trial last year?
Last year, I was on the A team and was doing the direct examination of the mother's nurse and the cross of her doctor.
And what happened before the regional tournament?
Before the regional tournament, after an argument between Coach Bracken and me, he demoted me to B team, where I would have to do the cross of the dog walker, and he took away my closing statement. This really upset me, and my friend Taylor saw that I was upset and knew that mock trial was very important to me, and she never had the same passion for it that I did. So she offered to drop out of the team in order for me to be on A team again so I could enjoy my senior year.
And were you very happy with Taylor Perkins in this moment?
I was. I did not ask her to do this for me. She did it purely out of the goodness of her heart and because she knew how much it meant for me. And I'm very appreciative of what she did for me.
And how did Brackman react to the awards that you won?
Brackman was very upset that I won the Best Attorney and Best Closing awards. He thought I didn't deserve them.
And what did he say when you won the award at the tournament, at the regional tournament?
He said I should not confuse good showmanship with good lawyering.
And how did this make you feel?
This made me feel very upset. Although my methods are very different from Brackman's, I was still prepared for the trial.
And what did you do after this?
After this and the meeting, I stormed out. I was quite upset, and with what I thought was a dry erase marker in my hand, I later learned was a Sharpie. I vandalized his car by writing Worst Attorney Award. That was a huge mistake, and I feel really bad about what I did. He did not deserve that. He really valued his Porsche, and it was wrong of me to vandalize it.
And once this had happened, did you forgive him for what he did to you?
I did. I took this whole little argument over a club way too far. I should have never vandalized his car. in all seriousness, this is just a club, and mock trial never should have gone that far as to damage his property.
And what did Mr. Brackman do when he found out?
He was quite upset, understandably. I know he valued that car, and I felt so bad. He kicked me off the team.
And how did you react to being kicked off the team?
Well, I understood where he was coming from. I was really sorry, but I did want back on the team if possible. And if not, I understood because I had vandalized his property. But I did want back on the team because it was something that mattered so much to me in my senior year.
So did you apologize to Mr. Brackman?
I did. The next day, I went to his office to ask to apologize, but his secretary told me he didn't want to speak to me. I then tried to apologize over text, but he didn't even seem to try to accept my apology. I offered to pay for the damages to his car, but he was very upset and didn't want anything.
And do you believe that your apology to him was sincere?
I do. I really meant my apology. As I said, I even offered to pay for the damages. I am truly regretful for what I did.
And now I want to direct your attention to March 5th, 2020. Can you describe what you did after school on this day, the day before Brackman was killed?
After school on this day, after getting kicked off the mock trial team, Taylor Perkins and I went to the Fry Shack where we saw the rest of the team. In the Fry Shack, we were all talking, and I let Alex Cifuentes play some games on my phone. Alex was getting a little under my skin with the whole trial and getting kicked off the team, which upset me. So Avery and I left. Taylor and I left.
And after giving your phone to Alex Cifuentes, do you remember having it after that moment?
I do not. I have no recollection of using my phone at all for the rest of that day.
And the next day, March 6th, what happened after you woke up?
After I woke up, the day started as normal. I went to pick up Taylor to take her to school when she told me that she'd been texting me. At that point, I realized I didn't have my phone and couldn't find it anywhere.
Did you remember the last time you used it?
The last time I could remember using it was the night before at the Fry Shack.
So what did you do next?
Taylor and I decided to skip school that day in order to look for my phone. We went to the mall and spent the whole day looking for it.
And now I want to move on to your relationship with Alex Cifuentes. What would you say about your relationship with him?
Alex Cifuentes and I are quite competitive. She was very good at mock trial, and we definitely pushed each other as teammates. However, I would not classify our relationship as a friendship. We were merely competitive teammates.
Did you ever text with Alex?
Alex is the last person on the team I would ask for help.
And then I want to move on to your relationship with Blair Rowlands. What would you say about your relationship with Blair?
I understand that Blair is a student who went to my school, and as far as I know, Blair is the only person who hated Brackman more than me.
And had you seen Blair recently?
I have not. In fact, no one who I know has. Seems Blair has just disappeared.
Ever since that Mr. Brackman was killed?
Correct.
So did you ever go to Brackman's house on March 6th?
I did not. In fact, I don't even know where Brackman lives.
So then there's no chance you could have ever committed this crime that you are being accused of.
There is no chance.
Thank you for your time today, Avery. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination.
Okay. Hi, Avery. My name is Jack, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. Is that all right?
Yes.
So you testified that you were really good at mock trial, right?
I would like to think so. I had won quite a few awards.
And that even though Coach Brackman knew you were the best attorney on your team, he always kind of criticized your work, right?
Yes, Coach Brackman and I had very different ideas for how one should go about preparation for a mock trial tournament.
And that made you pretty angry, like that he rewrote your closings, right?
It did. I would have very much appreciated if he could see the work that I did put in instead of how my work differentiated from his.
And you got really frustrated that he always made you kind of stick to the script, right?
It did. It frustrated me greatly, specifically with my closing arguments. I believe you have to figure out parts of the closing as it is presented based on the case and what happens during court.
Right. So let's move on to the regional tournament. You won Best Attorney Award there, right?
I did.
But even though you won that award, Coach Brackman still told you that you didn't deserve it and so on.
He did, yes.
And that additionally made you really angry, right?
It did. I was quite upset. I really wanted my coach to be proud of me.
So angry that you stormed out of practice and wrote Worst Attorney Award on Coach Brackman's Porsche, right?
I did, and I sincerely regret that. I took this club way too far, and I never should have vandalized his Porsche. It was a mistake.
Okay. And after that, Coach Brackman kicked you off the team, right?
Yes, he did. Rightfully so. I messed up.
And that made you even more angry, right?
I was upset because mock trial meant a lot to me, but I did understand why he kicked me off the team. I should not have vandalized his car.
Okay. So now let's move over to March 6th, the day Coach Brackman was killed. You stated that you were with your friend Taylor on that day, correct?
I was. I was at the mall with Taylor Perkins that day.
And you were retracing your steps from the day before so that you could find your phone, right?
Yes, I was.
But based on your testimony, nobody but Taylor was with you that day, right?
And no, that was a school day, so all of my other friends were in school. Taylor and I ditched school to look for my phone.
And just to clarify, you and Taylor are like best buds, right?
Yes, Taylor and I are very close.
In fact, you're such good friends that Taylor joined mock trial because of you, quit mock trial because of you, and now skipped school because of you, right?
Taylor and I joined mock trial together as friends, and then, yes, she did me a huge favor by dropping her position on the team so I could be back on the A team, which over the course of high school, I really came to love mock trial, and she didn't have the same passion that I did. So she selflessly sacrificed her spot on the team for me. And then, yes, she did ditch school with me to look for my phone.
Okay. If we can move over to Exhibit 14, which has previously been admitted, Your Honor. Can you look at this exhibit, Avery?
Yes.
Do you have it available?
I am. I'm just looking through the exhibits to find this one specifically.
Okay, let's let me know.
Yes, I have it.
Okay, and can you please read the first text starting with "I'm sure"?
This says, I'm sure you're aware that I got kicked off the team. I'm pretty desperate to get back on. Is there any way you'd be willing to talk to Coach Brackman about having me back?
And can you please read the text starting with, well, if he's upset?
Well, if he's still upset about his car, then he's going to be really upset when he sees what I do to his house.
And finally, can you please read the last text you sent?
I did not send these texts. However, I can still read the last text sent.
Okay.
It says, I'm going to wait until he's at work, then break in and trash it. That'll show him.
And you stated in your direct examination that you couldn't have sent these text messages because you lost your phone on the day of the murder, correct?
I did not send these text messages. That's correct.
But just to clarify, Exhibit 14 doesn't show a time or date when those text messages are sent, correct?
It does not. However, I never sent these text messages.
Okay, so let's just say that you did somehow lose your phone on March 6th when Coach Brackman was killed. You could have still sent those text messages on March 5th.
Theoretically speaking, yes, but Alex is the last person I'd ask for help on the team. I would not text him asking for help, let alone say these things. I felt very sorry for what I did to the car. I would never take it any further than that.
Okay. And finally, Avery, from your mock trial experience, you're really good at spinning a yard, aren't you?
I am quite good at using the facts of the case to conduct a closing without having a formal script, yes.
And so there's no way for us to know that you aren't using your persuasive experience in these proceedings, do we?
I would never do that here. As a member of the mock trial team, I know the importance of a trial, and I would not want to break the trial code of conduct.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, any redirect, Mr. Long?
Yes, please. Miss Becker, were you ever angry enough to kill or rob Mr. Brackman?
No, never. I made a stupid decision when I was angry when vandalizing his Porsche, and I could never do anything worse than that.
And when you vandalized his car, you used dry erase marker. You thought you were using dry erase marker, correct?
I did originally think that the marker in my hand was dry erase.
So then you didn't actually mean to vandalize his car with a permanent marker, correct?
Action, Your Honor. Speculation.
The witness has already stated that she believed she was using dry erase marker. So she already stated the part that I'm asking.
Okay. Overruled, Mr. Walker.
So then moving on, did you know where Brackman lived?
I did not until this whole case when his address had come up. I'd never known where he lived.
And finally, did you send those text messages to Alex Fuentes?
I did not. Alex is the last person on the team I'd ask for help.
Thank you, Mrs. Becker. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. So Ms. Becker, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And the defense may call its next witness.
The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand, please.
Okay. All right, you may proceed.
Alrighty. Good afternoon. Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
Alrighty. Let's begin with your relationship with Avery Becker. Why are you here today?
Avery Becker is my best friend, and he is being accused of murdering Mr. Brackman.
Okay. How did Avery know Mr. Brackman?
Mr. Brackman is Avery's mock trial coach.
Okay. Could you describe Avery's relationship with Mr. Brackman?
Mr. Brackman did not like Avery, and Avery felt the same way about Mr. Brackman. And Mr. Brackman was also very...
Speculation?
Response?
Pardon? Sorry.
Response to the objection. Do you need to have the objection repeated?
Yes, please.
Would you repeat your objection, please?
Yes, Your Honor. It's speculation.
Speculation on like where?
Speculation on the count of the relationship and Mr. Brackman's feelings towards Avery Becker.
Okay. Since the two have known each other for an incredibly long time, and Taylor and Avery have been incredibly close, we can deduct that they would know each other's feelings towards each other.
Okay, reply, if any.
Your Honor, I think this is more in the sense of she's simply stating exactly how Mr. Brackman felt, whether stating how she thought about Mr. Brackman's feelings. So she stated that it wouldn't be speculation, but in the sense that she is stating exactly how he felt about Avery Becker, it is speculation because she does not know the mind of Mr. Brackman.
Sustained, lack of adequate foundation for that testimony.
Okay. Okie dokie. Could you describe Avery?
I think you're frozen, Ms. D'Antoni.
1 second. There we go.
Okay, there you go. You're back.
I'm back. Alrighty. Could you describe Avery's involvement in mock trial?
Avery was a very talented attorney, but not always prepared for the meets. She was very good at thinking on her feet, always coming up with new ideas on the spot, but this lack of preparation often frustrated Mr. Brackman.
Was Avery ever punished for her work ethic?
One time she was demoted to the B team.
Was she always on the other team, or had she?
She was originally on the A team and then was demoted because of her lack of preparedness.
Okay. Did Avery get back on the A team after her demotion?
Yes, I quit the A team, so Avery could be on the A team from being on the B team, because without me there, the team would have fallen apart.
Okay, and why did you do this for Avery?
Avery was very passionate for mock trial, and I wasn't as passionate, so I quit because Avery would enjoy mock trial more than I would, and she deserved the spot on A team more than I wanted it.
Okay, now we're going to move on Avery's last practice, the practice after regionals. How did practice begin?
Mr. Brackman was yelling at Avery even though she won 2 awards, saying Avery didn't deserve them, and even though she won them at the tournament.
How did Avery respond to this?
She was very negative about this. She took a red marker and drew all over Mr. Brackman's beloved white Porsche, writing Worst Attorney Award.
And did she make it clear why she did that?
Avery was very angry at Mr. Brackman.
Okay. And how did Mr. Brackman respond to this?
He kicked Avery off the team.
Did Avery make any attempts to rejoin mock trial?
Yeah, she showed up to mock trial, but Mr. Brackman would not see her. She even texted Alex Cifuentes, who she isn't very close to, and asking if there was anything she could do to rejoin the team.
Okay. Did she ever reach out to any of her other former teammates?
Yeah, a couple members of the team.
Okay. Could you describe Avery's relationship with Alex?
They really didn't get along very well.
Once again, speculation.
Foundation, please.
Your Honor, Taylor.
No, not you, Miss Martin. I mean, Miss Biantoni can lay some additional foundation for
Sorry.
that testimony.
The nature of their previous, perceived relationship. That was a little unclear on my part. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, Ms. Perkins, can you respond to that question?
Yes, Your Honor. They didn't get along very well. They were kind of fake friends, just on the team together.
Once again, speculation.
Yeah. Can you testify as to why you believe that to be the case? Because I'm going to sustain that objection.
Because I am Avery's best friend, and so I saw them interacting, like Alex Cifuentes and Avery Becker.
Okay. Next question.
Okay. So let's move on to March 5th, the day before Mr. Brackman's murder. Where did you and Avery go after school?
We went to the Fry Shack.
Did you see anyone there?
Yes, the entire mock trial team was there.
Do you remember seeing anybody specifically?
I definitely saw members of the mock trial team, and specifically Alex Cifuentes was there.
Okay.
Can't hear your question. I'm sorry. Can't hear it. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you speaking.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. Do you remember where Avery's phone was at your time during the Fry Shack?
Yes, the phone was with Avery until she went to the bathroom, and she left it on the table when she went to the bathroom, but when we left, I didn't see her pick it up.
Who was near the phone when Avery left it on the table?
Alex Cifuentes.
Do you remember if Avery picked up her phone after you two left?
I don't remember her picking up the phone.
Okay. Where did you and Avery go after you two left Fry Shack?
We went to the mall.
Okay. Now I'd like to discuss your whereabouts on the morning of March 6, 2020, the day of Mr. Brackman's murder. Did you go to school that morning?
No, we didn't. We actually ditched school to go look at the mall and see if Avery had left her phone there.
Okie dokie. So where did you and Avery go to find the phone?
We went to the mall.
Okie dokie.
And we tried to retrace our steps there. And we also looked at the fry shack to go find the phone, but we didn't see it there, asking all the employees, and they said they hadn't seen one turned in.
Okay, so did anything else happen at the fry shack?
We saw the entire mock trial team there, but it was a little early for mock trial, so they were supposed to be at practice.
Asked and answered.
Yeah, that's sustained.
Okay. Why weren't they at practice?
Mr. Brackman had never showed up to the mock trial practice, and there's a 15-minute rule. If you're 15 minutes late, then the teacher doesn't show, then you're allowed to leave.
Okay. Now I would like to discuss your former classmate, Blair Rowlands. Could you describe the relationship that you perceive between Blair Rowlands and Mr. Brackman?
Blair really didn't like Mr. Brackman because...
Speculation.
Okay, let's let the witness finish the answer before you object.
Oh, sorry, Your Honor.
Mr. Brackman was Mr. Rowlands, Blair's father's attorney, and Mr. Rowlands was sentenced to prison after Mr. Brackman defended him.
Okay.
Okay, overruled.
Okay.
Proceed.
Okay. Was Blair Rowlands close with or friends with anybody on the team?
It seemed like Blair Rowlands was friends with Alex Cifuentes.
Okay. And was Blair at school on the day of Mr. Brackman's murder?
No, Blair was not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination, Ms. Martin.
Okay. Hi, Taylor. My name is Avery, and I'll be asking you a few questions if that's okay.
Okay.
Miss Perkins, you're best friends with Avery, correct?
Correct.
You wouldn't even be in mock trial without her, right?
Correct.
And you saw Avery and Brackman butting heads frequently, didn't you?
I did.
Isn't it true that they fought so much that eventually Brackman demoted her?
Yes, that is correct.
And Avery was very upset about being demoted, correct?
Absolutely.
So much so that you even quit the mock trial A team for Avery, right?
Yes, I did.
And this shows you would do a lot for Avery, wouldn't you?
I would.
Now, it was in your testimony that you said you found Coach Brackman and Avery's feud kind of funny, correct?
Correct.
Well, Avery getting demoted from the A team doesn't seem little or funny, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
And it was also in your testimony that you said you didn't care to get involved with their feud, correct?
Correct.
But you did get involved, right?
Well, I quit the team for Avery.
You did get involved, correct?
I guess so.
In fact, you did get involved even more by helping her try to get back on the team, correct?
Correct, but also Avery was my best friend and she really liked mock trial and I wanted to help her with that dream that she liked.
But you still helped her get back on the team, correct?
Correct.
Thank you so much. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Then Ms. Perkins, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. And the defense may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to call Blake Van Owen to the stand, please.
Okay. Proceed.
Hello. May you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Yes, I am Blake Van Owen, and I'm a private investigator.
And why are you here today?
Well, I was involved with the murder of Mackenzie Brackman in the case.
And when did your experience with law enforcement begin?
Well, I was on the Aurora Police Department until there was an incident with an arrest of a young woman.
And after being a police officer, what did you do for a living?
Well, I was a private investigator, which is what I am now, but first I was a school resource officer and as well as a private security guard.
And in which fields have you been an expert witness?
Well, I've been an expert witness in countless fields, including cell phone, data analysis.
Mm-hmm. And in a case, which side do you usually testify for?
Usually the defense, because the prosecution has other resources.
And why did you quit your job at the Aurora Police Department?
Well, I injured a young woman during an arrest, and I was acquitted of all wrongdoing. However, I felt terrible for my actions, and I knew change needed to come in the police department, so I decided to resign from my position.
Well said. And how is the situation resolved?
Well, the young woman sued both me personally as well as the police department, and we reached a settlement.
And what did you learn from this experience?
Well, I learned that there needs to be change in the criminal justice system, so I decided to resign because I felt so bad about this.
Your Honor, I move to enter Professor Blake Van Allen as an expert in the fields of police practices, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation taxes on the basis of his education and experience.
Ms. Guzzelli,
Permission to perform a voir dire, Your Honor.
you may.
You are here attempting to testify about crime scene reconstruction, correct?
This is true.
You are not a certified CSR, correct?
I'm not.
You have no experience doing crime scene reconstruction as a job, correct?
Not as a job, however, I do have experience through my private investigation.
You have no degree in crime scene reconstruction, right?
No degree, but I have a master's degree in criminal justice.
But not a degree in crime scene reconstruction, correct?
Not crime scene reconstruction specifically.
You have no formal training in crime scene reconstruction, correct?
No formal training, but experience.
Your Honor, based on the witnesses' responses and admission that they are not a certified crime scene reconstruction investigator, have no experience in the field, and have never done it as a job, I ask that their expert testimony be limited to cell tower analysis and police practices.
Response?
The qualifications for an expert witness does not necessarily need to have a formal occupation or certification. Just experience alone is enough to qualify an expert witness, and through his work as a private investigator, he has this experience to qualify as an expert, and I believe he should be allowed to testify on the topic of crime scene reconstruction.
All right. In the real world, counsel, I would probably limit his expertise in the matter as to his testimony, but because we're in mock trial, I will go ahead and qualify him in the areas in which he's proffered. And then you can the jury can determine the weight to be given to his opinions, and you'll have an opportunity to cross-examine him on his opinions. So proceed.
Based on your training and experience, how would you describe this police investigation?
Well, it was too rushed and not thorough at all.
And how did you educate yourself on the specifics of this case?
Well, I looked at the evidence as well as talked to the witness or the defendant.
And how did you review the information that the police gathered?
Oh, well, I reviewed it through their report.
Which aspects of this police investigation do you agree with?
Almost none of them. I agree that Mackenzie Brackman was murdered and someone broke into the house, but beyond that, nothing else.
So after the intruder entered the house using the back door, what do you believe happened?
Well, I believe that the intruder surprised Mr. Brackman because, as you can see in video evidence that I reviewed, the victim...
The witness is testifying to a fact that has not been yet admitted into evidence.
Response?
We can move on.
All right. Sustained.
How did the prosecution explain the stab wound inflicted?
Well, they believe that
Speculation.
Response?
The correct grounds have been established. This would be, this is just to lay this foundation for the line of questioning that will follow, and it's important for the jury to know the content or the context for the following lines of questioning.
Okay. Any reply to that?
No, Your Honor, I stand by my objection.
Okay. I'm going to overrule it. I'm assuming that this witness was in the courtroom for the presentation of the prosecution's case, and so he has an opportunity to know what their evidence was. Proceed.
So the prosecution believes that the intruder reached over the shoulder of Mr. Brackman and stabbed him in the back. However, this wouldn't make any sense because it would be extremely hard to get in that position.
And is this what is a more logical explanation?
Well, it's more logical that the intruder came armed with a knife and snuck up behind the victim and stabbed them in a downward motion into their back.
Mm-hmm. And in your professional opinion, where could the murder weapon have possibly come from?
Well, it doesn't make sense for it to come from the house because it doesn't match with the other knives in the knife block. And I know this because it's evidence I reviewed during my investigation. It would make more sense if the intruder brought their own weapon.
Mm-hmm. And now I'd like to talk about the cell phone tower data being reviewed in this case. What do you believe the cell tower data is able to prove?
Not a whole lot. It proves that Avery Becker's phone connected to cell towers.
And why is that?
Well, cell tower data can't be treated like GPS data because you can't say with 100% certainty the cell phone was at this location at this time, because cell phones connect to the tower with the strongest signal, not necessarily the tower in the closest proximity to the phone.
Mm-hmm. And which other suspect should be considered in this case?
Blair Rollins, for sure.
And how does Blair Rollins know Mr. Mackenzie Brackman?
Well, Mr. Brackman was the attorney for Blair Rollins' trial, and Blair Rollins' father was convicted and sentenced to life in jail, and Blair Rollins was extremely frustrated.
Objection, relevance, and objection speculation.
Response, Ms. May?
This is definitely relevant. We are pointing out a very important possible suspect in the case, and the jury should be aware of that. And speculation, I think that this is well within his bounds as a professional private investigator to be able to speculate on motives, and that's part of why he is an expert.
Okay. And do you care to make any further reply on that?
Yes, please, Your Honor. The witnesses testifying that Blair was angry about this, which is something that they are speculating. They are also talking about Jonathan Rollins' trial, and the defense is not presenting Jonathan Rollins as a possible suspect for this murder.
Okay. I'm going to sustain as to the anger for sure. We have no foundation to have that testimony come in. And as far as what the father said in his trial, was your argument relevant, Ms. Guzzelli?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, I'm going to allow the defense to put on its evidence, and you can cross-examine as to it, because they have the right to present an alternate suspect.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I please have permission to present exhibit number 22?
Well, you need to introduce the exhibit through testimony. No, before, well, you need to have some testimony about the exhibit.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I ask that time is stopped due to technical difficulties. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, may I please approach the witness with exhibit 22 then?
You may.
I am going to play exhibit 22.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Mr. Blake Van Allen, may you please describe the audio played?
This was audio from Jonathan Rollins' trial.
And it is my understanding that there is an extended version of this audio file. Does this clip accurately reflect the full recording?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, I move that exhibit 22 is entered into evidence.
Any objection?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
May I respond to that?
You may.
I believe this is an incredibly relevant piece of evidence because it it allows for the option of an alternate suspect, which is something that the prosecution in this case really neglected.
Okay, any reply to that?
I'd just like to reiterate that Jonathan Rollins is not being presented as an alternate suspect, so this does not go towards an alternate suspect for the defense.
Okay, I'm going to allow it. Overruled.
Professor Blake Ellen, why do you believe that Blair Rowland should be considered as a suspect in this case?
Well, in the audio, we heard Jonathan Rollins' trial, and that was right after he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. So Blair Rollins has a clear motive to kill Mr. Brackman because because his father was sentenced to life in prison.
Thank you so much. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. You are here to provide your expert opinion on this case, correct?
Yes.
For the defense, right?
Yes.
You've only ever worked for the defense, yes?
Yes, because I only testify for the defense because usually the prosecution has additional resources.
You work for the defense because you feel that you need to check the power of the police, correct?
Yes, I disagree with some police practices.
Perfect. You were a police officer, right?
I was.
And isn't it true that you were sued for using excessive force, correct?
I was, and after I resigned.
So you left the police force after this lawsuit?
Yes.
You make money testifying in different court cases every year, right?
Yes, this is my job.
You make around $100,000 per year, correct?
Something around there.
And you're making money on this case, right?
Yes, as I said before, this is my job.
You've made about $7,000 up to this point, correct?
Yes.
But after this trial, you will make a couple $1,000s more, right?
Yes, because this is my job and I'm paid to investigate.
Defense attorneys hire you with the expectation that you'll be skeptical of the police, correct?
While I am skeptical, yes, I would never lie under oath.
But you would not get hired if you agreed with the police, would you?
Well, if the evidence presented that, I would agree with the police. That's the most logical.
So you would
logical
not
thing
be
to do.
here testifying, making money, if you came to the same conclusions as the police during your investigation, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. The lawyer is asking my witness to speculate.
Response.
Your Honor, if the lawyer is present in a case where they are going against police and they came to the conclusions about a case while they make money testifying in different cases, they wouldn't make money if they didn't testify.
Okay, any reply, Ms. May?
Yes, that's not what you're asking my witness. You're asking my witness if the reason why he disagrees is simply because that's where he's making money. And I think that that's an unfair inference and implication that my witness is not being honest.
Well, I think the objection was based on the question asked. And I believe that the question asked was appropriate because it's asking this particular witness to testify about his own feelings, and that's not speculation, so overruled.
Thank you. Let's move on to the knife. You believe that Mr. Brackman was stabbed while sitting down, correct?
That's the conclusion I came to.
Meaning that the knife was held with the blade facing outwards, correct?
Yes.
Yet in your testimony, you stated that the most common way to hold a knife is with the blade facing towards you, right?
The most common doesn't mean 100% of the time.
Perfect. Let's talk about the evidence now. You reviewed all of the evidence and said that there were no signs of a struggle, correct?
No signs of a struggle, or that's the conclusion I came to.
But there was a broken plate on the floor, right?
I can't prove when that plate was broken.
And there was also an open knife drawer.
There was.
There was also a missing knife from the knife block.
Yes.
You believe that Mr. Brackman was unaware of his intruder, correct?
That is correct.
So let's go through this sequence of events in order for this to be true. The intruder would have had to not had Ring doorbell alerts to his phone, correct?
Yes.
Not heard the intruder trying the front door to see if it's locked, right?
Yes,
Not heard the intruder go through the back gate and come in the back door, correct?
that would be correct.
He would also have had to have been unaware of the intruder walking from the back door to the chair you theorize Mr. Brackman was sitting in when he was stabbed, correct?
I cannot speak to the witness's state of mind.
But you did testify that he was unaware, correct?
In my professional opinion,
Meaning, if he did hear these things, he wouldn't have been unaware of the intruder, correct?
it's my opinion that he didn't hear these things.
Perfect. Isn't it true that this chain of events would not explain how the crime scene was found? It does not account for several pieces of evidence found at the crime scene, right?
Which pieces of evidence are you referring to?
You did not include the broken plate in your report about what happened during the homicide, correct?
I didn't feel that it was necessary.
You didn't include the open knife drawer, correct?
Not necessary.
You also did not include the missing knife from the knife block in your report, correct?
Correct.
Meaning you did not include several pieces of evidence when creating your theory of events, correct?
I didn't classify those as necessary pieces of evidence because they're all circumstantial.
But they were pieces of evidence, correct?
Entered in this trial, yes.
Okay. You stated never to assume when investigating, yet you make a lot of assumptions during this case. You testified that the intruder was small, right?
Yes, because that's what I saw in the Ring doorbell videos that I reviewed during my investigation.
Yet these Ring doorbells have no objective measurements, correct?
No objective measurements. However, I can use my common sense and look at how tall the intruder was relative to things such as the fence.
But there were no concrete measurements, so you could measure and find out exactly how tall the intruder was, correct?
Nothing concrete.
Perfect. You testified that Brackman was sitting down when he was stabbed, right?
Yes.
There was no blood, no scuff marks, or evidence to corroborate this story, correct?
That is correct.
You testified that Brackman did not notice the intruder, right?
Right. I didn't feel that lined up with the chain of events that I came to the conclusion.
Again, this was something you assumed. There was no concrete proof to determine that Mr. Brackman was unaware of his intruder, correct?
Nothing that I can say with 100% certainty,
Perfect.
but looking at it through the lens of my experience, it makes the most sense.
You also testified that the knife was brought by the intruder, correct?
Correct. It didn't match with the knives in the knife block.
But it is not illegal to own a knife of a different brand, is it?
No.
Meaning there is no way to concretely prove that the intruder brought the knife, correct?
I can't concretely prove it.
Thank you. Finally, you testified that Blair Rawlings had a motive to murder Mackenzie Brackman, correct?
Blair Rawlins has a clear motive.
And you testified this because she spoke at her father's hearings, correct?
Yes, she did.
Yet this is a fact that can only be corroborated by yourself, correct?
Yes, however, I listened to the recording of the trial.
You failed to provide this recording in court here today, correct?
I provided the recording of Blair speaking during the trial.
In evidence, the only recording is of Jonathan Rollins speaking at the trial. There is no proof that Blair Rollins was present at this trial when her father was sentenced, correct?
My apologies, I misspoke.
You assumed all of these things because without them, you would not have a case. And if I'm correct, Mr. Van Owens, without a case, you would not be walking out of here $10,000 richer. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to start by addressing the situation that you faced while you were on the Aurora Police Department with a young woman of color. Did you regret that situation?
Absolutely. I think about it every day, and that's why I moved in the field that I'm in now.
And why have you only worked for the defense side of the case?
Well, it doesn't make sense for the prosecution to hire a private investigator because in the majority of cases, they have other resources such as police officers.
Mm-hmm. And have you done a lot of work for this trial?
Oh, countless hours.
And is that why you're being compensated?
Yes, I put in effort and I'm paid because it is my job, such that a police officer is compensated for their work.
Now I'd like to talk about the data or the information you used to come to the belief that Mr. Brackman could have been surprised by the intruder. Are you able to turn off ring notifications?
Yes, that is an option.
And why does it not make sense for the knife to be positioned the way the prosecution wants the jury to believe?
It's not the most comfortable way to hold a knife.
Mm-hmm. And why do you believe that the weapon was brought onto the scene of the crime instead of from the crime scene itself?
When I reviewed the evidence, it didn't match the other knives in the knife block.
I'd now like to talk about the scuff marks and the broken plate found on the crime scene. Why should the jury not consider this as substantial evidence?
Well, you can't prove when those scuff marks were made. You can't put an exact date.
The witness is testifying to facts such as the scuff marks that have not yet been admitted into evidence.
Response?
He's just in this situation, he might not be testifying for evidence, but he is describing the crime scene. The scuff marks were part of the crime scene, and it's relevant for him to give his expert opinion about what aspects of the crime scene should and should not be considered in this case.
Okay. There is a photograph of the scuff marks. It is in evidence in this case. I'm going to overrule your objection.
I'll restate the question. Why should the jury carefully consider the plate and the scuff marks as very flimsy evidence?
Well, they're all circumstantial. I could knock a plate off of the table and it would break, and that doesn't mean that I was in a fight. There could be scuff marks on the floor, and that doesn't mean that I was in a fight. They're all circumstantial.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right. And Mr. Van Owen, you're excused. Any
Thank
further
you.
witnesses for the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And I believe it is time for closing arguments. Okay, for the prosecution, Mr. Walker,
Yes, Your Honor, may I begin?
you may.
The means, the opportunity, and the motive. Members of the jury, the evidence presented in this case showed that Avery Becker had to get even. She even went so far as to say that she would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing she did. Coach Brackman took away her hobby and her passion. She was angry. So angry that she went to Coach Brackman's house and not only broke into it, but also killed Coach Brackman. There shouldn't be a doubt in any of your minds that Avery Becker committed this crime. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence today to prove that Miss Becker committed burglary and murder. Detective Markowitz, a member of the Denver Police Department for over a decade, testified that Miss Becker was recorded driving directly from her house to the Brackman household at exactly the time of the crime. Avery Becker's only alibi is her best friend, Taylor Perkins. Tabor previously made numerous decisions that would have significant impacts on her life, and even skipping school so that she could help Avery. Miss Becker then got rid of her phone in hopes of destroying all possible evidence. Additionally, thanks to Alex Cifuentes, we have text messages from Avery Becker on the day of the murder, after she had supposedly lost her phone. Avery specifically said in those messages that she would go to Brackman's house and trash it, asking for Alex's help. Alex also testified that Avery hated Coach Brackman for kicking him off the team. The defense has tried to pin the crime on Blair Rollins, but what evidence is there against Blair? The answer is none. Blake Van Owen, an individual who has no education in crime scene reconstruction, nor any sort of education that qualifies him to testify about this crime, stated that he thought Avery was incapable of committing this crime due to speculative factors, and that Rollins's motive was that she had previously been shown with an angry disposition at her father's hearing. Yet there's nothing to prove that she was ever upset with Brackman, much less even at her father's trial in the first place. The defense has tried to strip the credibility of our case numerous times by saying that there was a rush to build a case. Yet, shown by Kyle Cusack, who spent countless hours reconstructing the scene for us to further analyze, as well as Detective Markowitz, who took the time to process all of the CDRs from Avery Becker's phone on the day of the murder, it's impossible to make such an accusation. The prosecution must show beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker is guilty of the crimes of first-degree murder and second-degree burglary. We have met the burden of proof. We request that the jury find Avery Becker guilty on both counts and not let Avery Becker improvise her way out of another dire situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Closing for the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you listened as a murder case was brought against my client, Avery Becker. The prosecution wants you to believe that Avery Becker murdered his mock trial coach, Mr. Mackenzie Brackman, simply because they didn't get along. The evidence does not point to this conclusion. I'm sorry. I thought I heard. I'm so sorry. I thought I heard an objection. Oh my God. I can keep going. Sorry about that.
Yes, go ahead.
The prosecution wants you to believe that Avery Becker murdered his mock trial coach, Mr. Mackenzie Brackman, simply because they didn't get along. The evidence does not point to this conclusion in any way. In fact, Avery Becker really spent the day looking for his misplaced phone with his friend, Taylor Perkins. Yet, the prosecution tells you a different story. You heard from Detective Jordan Markowitz, who places Avery at the scene of the crime only because Avery's phone connected to a series of towers. In fact, Avery was no longer in possession of his phone when the crime took place. Avery was not at the crime scene. He was at the mall looking for his phone. Kyle Kuzak's crime scene reconstruction was biased and incomplete. It was created on a series of inferences. He assumed that the scuff marks were created at the time of the murder. He assumed that Mr. Brackman's ring doorbell notifications were on, and recklessly, he did not consider other options. He did not consider the very real possibility that the murderer could have brought the weapon onto the scene of the crime. Then you heard from Alex Cifuentes, a student who has spent their entire mock trial career in Avery Becker's shadow. You listened as Avery Cifuentes revealed their bias against Avery, one response at a time. On the other hand, Professor Blake Van Owen slowly picked apart this investigation. His analysis revealed that cell tower records are very different from GPS tracking and cannot support the far-fetched conclusions that the prosecution reached. We have no reason to think that Avery was at the scene of the crime. The cell tower information is not clear enough to draw a conclusion, and therefore the prosecution is unable to link Avery to the crime scene, and therefore doesn't have a case. Blake Van Owen also brought the crime scene reconstruction into serious question. He proposed an alternate scene, and a far more logical one. He suggests that Mr. Brackman was surprised by the intruder, which makes much more sense considering the angle and the positioning of the knife. The prosecution also failed to obtain complete cell tower records. They could have looked at the cell tower data for everyone who was in the region at the time of the murder, but they chose not to. These shortcomings point to a fundamental flaw in this investigation. The prosecution chose their suspect, then selected evidence that supports their claim. If you have learned anything from this case, it is this: when you rush, you miss things. In this trial, the prosecution missed a lot. For example, Detective Jordan Markowitz completely neglected a very serious suspect, Blair Rollins. Mr. Brackman was responsible for the fact that Blair's father is now serving for life in prison. On the other hand, Avery Becker and Mr. Brackman simply did not like each other. However, the jury is not responsible for speculating on motives. The jury is not responsible for gathering evidence or identifying possible suspects. That is what the prosecution must do. It is the prosecution's job to present a case void of any reasonable doubt. Unfortunately, they have failed in this task. There is significant doubt present in this case, which makes the jury's task simple. I ask that you follow the evidence, or lack thereof, to the conclusion that Avery Becker is innocent of murdering his mock trial coach, Mr. Brackman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. May. Is there any remaining time for the prosecution to present a reply? A rebuttal, rather? And if so, how much time does the prosecution have? Timekeepers.
I'm not sure, but I can make sure to keep it brief if that's any consolation.
Well,
Your,
let's just see.
Your
Yes.
Honor, this is Mr. Henderson. According to the
Yes.
chat, prosecution has 3 minutes remaining.
Thank you. Okay, proceed, Mr. Walker.
Okay. The defense would like you to think that there was a jump to conclusions about this case by Detective Markowitz. Detective Markowitz used his years of experience in this line of work to refine the possible culprits, pile up evidence against that individual, and follow that lead. He had no reason to believe that Avery's phone was tampered with. The possibility of Avery Becker being the perpetrator presented countless instances of undeniable evidence that have been presented today. Additionally, there was absolutely no evidence presented against Alex Fuentes nor Blair Rollins that was anything but speculative. This case was built with the knowledge that by the end, the prosecution would show without a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker committed this crime. The prosecution has met this burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Well, thank you, counsel. We'll give our jurors an opportunity to do their scoring. Anybody that wants to come back on in video, please feel free to do so at this point. There we are. Well done. Round one is the hardest one, as you know. Well, some of you know who participated before, and those of you who are new, round one, phew, you got it under your belt and you can move on and everything gets easier from here. So well done, especially since we all had to deal with this new way of doing mock trial. And nobody would prefer to do it this way, but I'm so glad that the program continued and was not called off because we couldn't all be in the courtroom together. So I think that those who put together this way of proceeding did a great job. And all of you who are probably more used to the technology than I am were great at presenting your exhibits so we could all see them on the screen, and going on and off with the muting and the video. So well done. Appreciate it. Mr. Henderson, thank you for being the courtroom monitor and keeping us on track here.
You're welcome.
Great. And I want to thank the coaches who are probably watching right now remotely. And we all know how much time they put in. And as I guess Mr. Brackman did, unfortunately, he didn't survive. So I thought it was a great fact pattern for mock trial participants to have the murder of their mock trial coach. I don't know how the coaches felt about that fact pattern, but I thought it was really well done. So let me, I know the jurors are voting, so to speak, and grading. And I just need, I guess, Mr. Henderson, are you keeping track of when they're done with their score sheets?
Your Honor, I don't know the answer. Well, I guess the short answer is not that I know of, but let me check into that.
Okay, I actually think that they submit the sheets themselves, and then somehow we get the word that the sheets have been submitted and are complete. And then we can make comments, but I'm trying to recall exactly how that happens.
I know the sheets are submitted electronically, Your Honor,
Yes,
but
yes.
what happens with them after that point, I don't know.
Well, I think they go to the people who are doing the overall scoring, and then sometimes, just for participants who haven't done this before, it's possible that the scorers did not add up all the numbers, or perhaps they omitted something on their score sheet. So we're just going to wait to make sure that the sheets are complete before we start providing our feedback, which will be short so that you can move on to your round two. Let me see if I have a note on how we know if they're complete. Okay. Okay, I think, Mr. Henderson, that the scoring room is going to notify you. of the all clear. So. I certainly hope that by next year, we're back in the courtroom in person and everybody will have been vaccinated and we'll be moving past all of this. I'm sure it's been tough. I don't know if you all have been in person in school or remotely in school. It's been a tough year for everybody, I know.
Thank you so much for judging. I had a lot of fun, so I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad. It's fun for us too. Especially, we get to see some very good lawyering from our students, and having been on the bench for a long time, sometimes lawyers don't do as good a job as some of you students
Hi,
do.
Kim. So what do I do now? The trial is done. I know that one scorekeeper has submitted, but what do I do?
Well,
Okay,
I don't
stay
know.
open until everybody has submitted their scores.
And how do I know when that happens?
And are they doing an after chat?
We will after we get the all clear.
So you'll need to keep the room open as long as they're doing stuff.
Okay.
And then once all of the scores have submitted their forms, then they can do an after chat if they choose. And you'll need to keep the room open because if you leave, I think that kicks everybody out.
Okay. So how do I know when all the scorekeepers have submitted their scores?
You can just turn off your microphone and ask them.
Oh. Okay. All right. Thanks, Kim.
Okay. Do you want to stay on the phone? Or?
I'm going to mute myself from the entire group here.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. Okay, I think we have. All right, I think in the chat room, it looks like all three have submitted their score sheets.
Yes, Your Honor. It's my understanding that all three have submitted.
Good. Okay. Then I'm just going to make a couple of comments because I know that we're a little bit late. So I just wanted to say that you were all good. There were some people I thought that did a great job of questioning. Mr. Walker did a great job because you had very good questions on direct, very specific questions. Where did I? Okay, the exhibits came in with good foundation. That was great. I would say one of you spoke too fast on opening. I would just slow down because then you can pay more attention. Let's see here. The witnesses were terrific. Defendant, you were so sincere.
Thank you.
Really, yeah, it really came across. And then at the end, I would say there was excellent voir dire on Blake Van Owen and Blake's shortcomings as an expert. That was good. And then in excellent cross by Ms. Gazelle at the end. I would just avoid saying perfect when you got an answer that you really liked. But excellent questioning. And that's really all I have to say, because I want to let the scorekeepers make some comments also. Mr. Bird, do you want to start out?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say I think you all did a really good job. You know, it's on YouTube live and you have all these people watching and you've been preparing for so long. So I think that everyone handled the stress really well. One of the best things I think was how respectful everyone was. I don't think that there was anyone being, you know, rude or combative. I think there was respect on both sides for everybody, and that was really nice to see. I think the witnesses did an excellent job. Virtually no reading of notes on the witnesses. They were answering questions like they were that person. I thought it was very convincing. The biggest problem I saw was there was a lot of reading. You know, you really want to come across as sincere and, you know, this is who I am. This is not an act. This is not a script. I know the case in and out, and I'm going to tell you why we win. And I saw a lot of reading, which diminishes that. It makes it seem like you are reading a script. But I would have been very worried and stressed. And so I probably would have been reading my notes too. And it's not to say that you should never read your notes. I just thought that there was probably a little more than ideal.
Okay, Ms. Caruso.
Yeah, guys, I was thoroughly impressed with everybody. I thought you were all very well prepared. I would say that if you continue down this path, or if any of you are actually interested in the practice of law, really practice your, I call them tells, right? So they're the nervous tics that we all have, the space fillers, the have to feel like I have to say something. So whether that's when you ask a question and instead of just lifting your voice at the end, because that's the nomenclature for a question, you say correct, right? Over and over again. It's just something that's not necessary. And I think it's a natural thing to do to fill that space. Or I think I heard a few okie dokies as kind of just, it's a nervous thing that's completely natural. But I'd say work on that. You don't always have to fill that space. I think the judge can account for attorneys. It's very hard for us to stop talking sometimes. But great job, guys, everybody.
Ms. Ryan. Any comments? You're on mute.
For
There
some
we
reason,
go.
my space bar wasn't unmuting me. I agree with Mr. Bird and Ms. Caruso that everybody did a fabulous job. One thing that makes this type of scenario harder than being in the courtroom is you don't get the ambiance or whatever of the solemnness of being at counsel bench and having the witness and the jury look at you. So I agree that we got a lot of ums and okie dokies and perfect and things that you normally wouldn't do when you're in the setting of a courtroom, because your whole demeanor when you're in the courtroom before the judge really does change you. I know some of the witnesses, I agree, did do a lot of reading, but we had one witness the whole time was like this. And, you know, that nervous shake of their leg or whatever is really obvious, you know, with this format, but you would be able to control it a little more when you are physically in the courtroom and have that. But everybody did a great job. I thought round one went really well, and I hope you both teams get to excel at this next round.
All right, well, that would conclude our trial in round one. And good luck to all of you in future rounds. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think, Mr. Henderson, we've concluded.